What is going on, miners, and welcome back to the Hobbyist Miner channel. Well, today we're going to go ahead and build our next mining rig. Going to go ahead and go over some of the hardware here, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what we're doing, and then we'll go ahead and jump in. So decent amount of hardware here. This is going to be a smaller build. It is a 5 GPU build based off of the motherboard here. We have 4 cards right now. We have a 5th one on the way, but I wanted to go ahead and get this thing mining. So we are using a 750 watt Aries game power supply. This is what I've been using recently on my test bench. I've had really good luck with it, so we went ahead and nabbed another one. This will only be powering the motherboard, so 750 watts is pretty much overkill. For the motherboard, which is one of the most important ones, we are using the ROG Strix B550F gaming board. So this has a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total slots, as you guys can see here, and we'll be using GPU risers. In addition to that, we will be running a HP power supply. I'm actually going to go ahead and swap out this one with one of these over here. So these right now are the HP 1200 watt power supplies, and they actually drop down to 900 watts when you're running off of 120 volt. Well, now that we are on 240, these have ramped up to 1200. So if you think about it, we have 1200, 1200, 1200. So it's 3600 watts right here. That is a lot for 12 cards. Almost overkill. And you can always tell when these are like at their max or almost there, because they sound like a jet engine. Right now you can tell they don't. So I highly recommend not using these to their full potential. So don't run these HP power supplies at the max amount. As I said, you can tell because they take off like a jet engine. So mine right now are not, and I would think so. Between 1200 watts each, they are not near maxing it. So I'm going to take one of these 1200 watts and use it over here on this setup. And this is an older one. This one's only 750 watts. So we're going to swap this in and then balance this out in the meantime. Okay, so what else we got here? So we have 8 gigs of 3200 memory. We have a AMD Ryzen 3 3100, as well as the heatsink here. And we do have a solid state drive, 128 gig GPU risers as well. And then let's go ahead and go down the list here. So we have an EVGA GTX 1060. We have a XLRB 1650. We have an XFX 580 8 gig card. And then we have a EVGA GeForce RTX 2080 Super XC. So this is the big boy of the group. The last card I'm waiting for to arrive is actually one of my GPUs that I sent out for repair. It's on its way back. Yes, a victory. It is the Sapphire Pulse RX 580 8 gig card. So this will be an entirely only Ethereum build with literally 5 different cards. So hey, it is what it is. It's what we could find. So other than that, to give you guys an idea, all of these 3 cards were purchased secondhand. This card was purchased new over a year ago. I had it in my gaming rig. Now I have that 3060 if you're following my channel. The Ryzen 3 3100 I got off of Facebook Marketplace, and I bought the memory new. The motherboard is brand new, but I bought from one of the community members. I bought the power supply new. That of course is refurbished. And then of course our GPU risers new. So let me go ahead and swap out our HP power supplies, and we'll get started with this build. Alrighty, so I swapped out the power supply, so we're good to go there. As you guys can see, we now have the 750 watt as well as the 1200 watts, so plenty of power. And these things are awesome, guys. I mean, 40 bucks for the power supply, and then the breakout board, I forget what that's at, maybe 30. And then you're off to the races. So they're phenomenal. I hope to do a future video on some of these server power supplies. But we're set and good to go. We have this one here, which is the 1200 watt. It's actually still warm right now. So yes, so this has plenty of slots available to us. We're going to need 2 for each card. So 2, 4, 6. That'll give us 3 cards, 4 cards, 5 cards, 6 cards. So we'll actually have 2 slots fully available, and we'll be mining entirely off of this one as you guys can see. So let me go ahead, get this cleared off. We'll get the motherboard out and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so I think our workspace is good to go. We got our motherboard with a rubber mat there. Layout here, we got our Arctic Silver for our thermal paste, some tools, alcohol wipes. We're going to clean off everything ahead of time. We have our solid state drive adapter so we can light up HIVEOS. We have our brackets here. These are the GPU hangers. This one I actually have to break out. You actually break out the X. They're just for supports when it's being made, guys, from the guys over at Misfits Mining, and also Chump Change there. So shout outs to him. Very cool logo. Yes, that's a cat with a Bitcoin gold chain. And then these are actually our standoffs that allow the motherboard and the power supply to sit off of the metal rack. So we'll get into that once we get to there. But other than that, we're set and ready to go. So let me go ahead and get the motherboard unboxed and start to get the CPU and memory installed. Alrighty, so let's unbox our motherboard here. Look at it. It hasn't even been opened yet. That's crazy. So let me go ahead and get a screwdriver and we'll just cut that open. Brand new, which is awesome. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look. Everything looks right, which is great, which I'm happy to see. Okay, so we have some SATA cables, so we'll hold on to these, which will work out really well. We'll put those aside. Let me get this sucker set up. We'll boost it up a little bit here. Keeping it on the anti-static bag, which is great. Always a good call. Let me see if I can bump you guys a little closer here on the tripod. There we go. Come on. There we go. Perfect. Okay. So not a lot going on here for us for what we're doing. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots, which is perfect. We're going to do 4 today. We're going to install our CPU, and then we're also going to go ahead and do our memory. So we're going to go ahead and start with the CPU. We are going to go ahead and remove these screws here because of the way that this is designed. Now this is a second-hand cooler that came with the AMD Ryzen 3. You can see this is actually pretty beat, so we're going to clean this off right here. You can feel there's a little bit of residue. We're going to clean this off with an alcohol wipe. So let me go ahead and grab one real quick here. Always good to keep them readily available. And then we're also going to go ahead and clean off the CPU as well, just to make sure that things are good to go. All right. So yeah, that is a dirty heatsink right there. That's the way I got it. My guess is the person wasn't super knowledgeable. So hopefully everything works out with the CPU, to be honest. So we're going to go ahead and clean this off. And you can already see it's coming off like no problem, which is awesome. There you go. It is all coming off, which is great. So my guess is they just weren't super knowledgeable and just took apart the computer real quick. Didn't even think about it, parted it out, and we got our hands on it. So that looks significantly better, as you guys can see. So that is good to go. So we're going to put our dirty alcohol wipes aside. We also do have our GPU, or CPU now. So Ryzen 3 3100. So let's go ahead and get that opened up. They thankfully kept this, which is very surprising based off the condition of the cooler. And there she blows. And this will work out well. I mean, you could, honestly, you could mine on this, and that's something we can consider if we want to do it. It's a Ryzen 3 3100, so maybe we'll go down that route of mining on it. What do you guys think? Leave a comment down below. Should we mine on this as well as the GPUs? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this down oh so delicately, and we're going to get out some more alcohol wipe, and we're going to go ahead and be cautious here. It looks like there's some residue around the outside, so they didn't do a great job there. So we're going to go ahead and clean this up. Yeah, it's definitely not the cleanest CPU we've seen, but it's secondhand, and it was cheap enough. Negotiated it down pretty good. I think I got this and the heatsink for $100 US, so it worked out great. I'm going to go ahead and do one more, as that does not look perfect quite yet. Now I know we're going to be putting thermal paste right on here. I totally understand. Trying to handle with care not to mess up any of our pins. That's the last thing we need tonight while doing this build. Oh, come here. I think we're just about good. I've just been rotating this around a little bit. Yeah, we're good. We're good. The top actually was cleaned well. The sides is where it had the issue. Okay, cool. So let me go ahead and get this cleaned up real quick. Put our trash aside. We don't need our alcohol wipes anymore. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move this. Oh, sorry about that. We're going to move this closer here. And we can go ahead and install this now while we're waiting. And then we'll go ahead and take off the brackets here. And we'll be using these punch ones that it comes with. So if you're installing this, you can see the design on the bottom. And you can kind of get an idea as to the way the layout should be on this. So right now, and there's actually a little notch here in the bottom corner to let you know where it should go, and there's a notch right here as well, so it lets you know kind of, okay, how does this line up? So there's a little notch here, and I don't know that I can show it entirely on the corner on the camera, but you see how it's gold right next to my thumb, like right there? That is actually, they have a little arrow right here on the motherboard, so that you know, like, hey, that's where it lines up. So we're going to go ahead and just lightly lay it in there. It kind of, you could tell it fits like a glove, and then we're going to lower this down and snap that in, and now look, it's not going anywhere, which is great. So now we're going to take a screwdriver, and we're going to go ahead and undo the brackets that come with it, because as you can see, this won't work. Sorry for reaching across. See how these kind of punch down? These are a little different. These kind of punch down and screw into it. So I need to undo those screws there, and then we're going to use those existing slots. So let me go ahead and undo this. And yes, I do know that some of you guys are super anal here and would be wearing like gloves when you do this, but we'll survive. It'll survive, guys. All right, let me go ahead and get this set up. I'll be back here in just a second. We're going to go ahead and get our heatsink installed. All right, so sorry about that quick break. I actually started doubting myself on this heatsink placement, but we're good to go. Okay. So our CPU is in place. I have a few different here, 2 different Arctic Silvers and an Enermax thermal paste. We're going to go ahead and use Arctic Silver, one of my favorite. Do you guys have one that is your preference? Comment down below in the comments and let me know. But we're going to do some Arctic Silver here. I've been using this for years, Arctic Silver 5. So we're going to go ahead and do the P. I know everybody has a different avenue they go for their thermal paste, but to be honest with you, the P works and it does well. Just a reminder though, do not get this on anything, especially the board, so just be super careful. All right, so there's our P. We're good to go. I'm gonna cap that. You do not want that on your clothes, you don't want that on your hands. It's just a pain in the butt to get off. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead and install our heatsink, and it just lines up with the holes here. And now we're going to go ahead and screw this in. These types of heat sinks, if I have to go with like air cooled, I love these kind just because of the easy use with the install. I would rather do these than any other types. Now granted, this is for air cooling, not necessarily for like your gaming all-in-one. I know that's entirely different, but if I had a choice, this is one of the better ways to go. So you just tighten it, and I'm apologizing, my elbows are in the way and stuff like that. There isn't really a great angle to do this. I don't have a camera like right up above, but you just tighten until it stops. It's always good to cross tighten. Some of you guys are familiar with that. I'll explain that in a second. Okay, so cross tightening means you tighten like here, and then you tighten this side, and then you tighten this side, and you tighten this side. So you kind of cross diagonal tighten as needed. So that is done and good to go. Let me go ahead and take a look at the motherboard as well as the motherboard book and figure out where our CPU header is, and we'll get the CPU fan installed. Alrighty, so we brought out our book, and I know it's really hard to see, but there's actually two CPU headers on here. One is for the fan, and one is actually, the way the book describes it, is fan and pump header. So I'm glad we went ahead and checked it. So we want the one on the left. So that would be this one right here. So we're going to go ahead and install that, and we'll worry about cable management later after we get everything running. This, you could probably put in a little loop here. Actually, now I'm going to get a cable tie. Hang on here. You guys made me. You made me do it. You made me do it. So I grabbed a cable tie real quick, trying to find a short one. Here we go. I really do like to use like these cable ties that you nab off of cables and save them. I feel they work really well. They're easy to get off versus zip ties, which are a little more permanent. I mean, and granted, I understand you can cut a zip tie, but these seem to work well, and we have plenty of them. You know, it's a little twisty tie. You know, you twist it, and you're good to go. So this is going to be an open air setup on my rack, so I'm not worried too much on cable management, to be honest with you. So our CPU is done and good to go. Our next step is to install our memory. So this is the G.Skill Aegis DDR4 3200, and this is like 40 bucks. I'm not too concerned about the memory. You know, some people go crazy about it. 3200 is kind of a good avenue to go. So it'll do the trick. So before I go ahead and put this in, you do want to check your motherboard book and see where in here they talk about the memory configuration, because of the fact that you need to know what slot to go into. So that's what I'm looking for right now, just to see the combination of which one of these 4 slots. So let me figure that out, and I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so we are good to go. I went ahead and took a look on the book. So this is why it's important to read these. So if I have 1 stick, it actually wants me to go into this second slot here. If I had 2 sticks, it wants me to use these 2, and then it has the configuration for 3. So you always want to take a gander and look to see exactly what slots that you should be putting this in. You don't want to mess up your memory, and entirely you also don't want to deal with troubleshooting memory. This doesn't really have like significantly large heat sinks on this, and you just want to do it until it clicks. And you can always do one side click and then the other side clicked well. You want to make sure that you don't have any issues there. So our CPU is installed, our memory is installed. Taking a look next, our hard drive, our SATA is right down here. So it did come with some SATA cables here. These are a little bit longer. It also doesn't have, it does come with 190 degree, which is awesome. I like using the 90 degrees on the boards. Now granted, this board's nicely designed. It's off to the side, so even if we use one of the X16 slots, it's not going to interfere. Maybe if we use this one down here, you know, but the way it's off to the right is really, really nice. So I think our next step, guys, is to go ahead and get our board installed in place over on our rack over here. So what I'm going to do next is we're going to go ahead and grab our standoffs. That's what these are. I'll show them to you real quick. So the motherboard, you know, has screws that come with it. So those are somewhere in the box. I'll have to take a look. And then what this is these are awesome. So these are standoffs, it's called. And they come with the GPU hangers. I'll put a link down below to the guys that design these. And so what this is this goes ahead and sits. See, the metal racking goes in here, and then the motherboard sits on top. So this is what's going to allow us to go ahead and keep off of our metal rack. So let me go ahead and get our motherboard installed, and then I'll be back and we'll start looking at power. Okay, so our motherboard standoffs are installed. I'm going to try to show these to you guys without it getting all unfocused. So as you can see, they pretty much are self-explanatory. They're just a standoff that sits right into the motherboard. I installed 4 of them in here. And so I'm going to go ahead and get our motherboard installed into our wire rack. I'm also going to go ahead and get our power supply installed. And I'll be back here in just a minute, guys. And yeah, we'll get installing GPUs. Okay, so let's go over what we got. We got everything pretty well installed here. So our board is installed. It is on the standoffs. I'm trying to get out of the light here. Let me come over this side for you guys. There we go. So the board's installed. We do have the standoff, so it is not on the actual wire rack. Same thing with our power supply here. It's on these standoffs. They come with the GPU hangers. So I'll provide you guys a link in the description down below. So after we installed that, talking about our power, we have our 24 pin installed. We just routed it around the back here, threw in some zip ties, as well as this board actually takes in 8 pin as well as a 4 pin for motherboard power. So quite a bit of hefty power there. So we routed that around and came to here. We have our SATA cable sitting by, and then we also have our SATA sitting by ready to go for our solid state drive. Let's go ahead and get our server power supply set up, and I'm actually going to wait to do that now that I'm thinking through it, because I want to get the GPUs in place first. Look at this mess of a workbench. But let's go ahead and get the hangers installed on our cards and get them hung, and then we'll have a better idea as to where to put our server power supply. So let me go ahead and get the GPU hangers installed. They're simple and easy. They just slide in, and there's a kernel nut. You tighten it up and you're good to go. So I'll show you guys in just a second here. Alrighty, so we're gonna do 4 cards right now, and then we're gonna add the 5th one down the road here once we get it in. So I broke out the middle. They usually look like this, and these you can break out. I'll show you guys that when we get to it. But I broke out these previously. So all you have to do is, the way that these work, which is actually kind of nice, is you go ahead, you put these right through the slots, and then you go ahead and line up your hole here. So let me go ahead and do that. So we're going to push this in here. So as you guys can see, there's the shiny part. It came right through. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we have to undo this this screw, and then we'll put it right through the hole. So let me go ahead and do that and see what we get here. Okay, so that's undone. We're going to line it up the best we can. I'm trying to show you guys the best we can. So there we go. See how that screws right there. And we'll go ahead and tighten it. And in this kernel nut we trust, right? All right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just tighten this up the rest of the way, just to be safe. Just nice and gentle using this set of pliers here. The Allen head key that I have is a little small, I think. And I hate to kind of stop what we're doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and get this tightened, and then I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so we got our GPU hangers installed on these cards. I'm going to go ahead and move these out of the way. Here's the last card that we need to do, which is our 1650. And I wanted to show you guys kind of how this works. So there is the nut there, and these you actually break out so that you can freely access, if needed, any of your display spots. So you actually just take this, and I know it sounds terrible, you actually take it and just press down, and you can hear it starting to crack. And then eventually they come out. There we go. Okay, cool. So you can see they kind of start to just pop out. And I know it seems like you're breaking it. But now that allows us to go ahead and install this properly. All right, cool. So let me get this installed real quick, and then we'll be back to get these GPU hangers set up. Okay, so we're ready to get some of these installed. I'm probably going to put the big ones in the back and the smaller ones in the front. So we'll start out with our big boy, our 280, our 2080. So the way these work, for those of you guys that are curious, you actually like come in on an angle here. I'm trying to do this through the camera. Okay, you see that? And then you come up and you hook it on. So you can see, sorry, I was trying my best. So you see how it's got plenty of room there, and then it hooks right onto here. And then we're gonna slide this right to the back there. So there's one card down and good to go. We're gonna take our second one here and do the same thing. So we're gonna come in on an angle, and then we're gonna pop this sucker in. Sorry, the camera's all over the place, guys. Let's see if I can do it. All right, I'm gonna put the camera down. Trying to do this one-handed is really, really silly. So let me go ahead and put the camera down. I'll be right back. Alrighty, so note to self, I'll try to do that one-handed in the future. So we have our 2080, our RX 580, we have our 1060, and we also have our 1650, all lined up and good to go. So I put them off to the side here. I push back our PDU. I actually even have it Velcroed right here just to make sure it doesn't move at all. So that gives us some nice adequate space as well as airflow. And then when we get our next card in, we can put it right there. That's the RX 580 that we're waiting to get in, the Sapphire Pulse. So I'm thinking of two options. First option, do I put the power supply like over here and then move the card? Or I'm thinking about putting the HP power supply right here. So let me go ahead and grab that, and I'm gonna play around with kind of a best layout with that, and I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so after testing a few things out, we ended up laying the HP power supply directly next to the motherboard here. It has the rubber mat material that I was talking about earlier to kind of stop it from touching at all the metal rack. So it's directly below our cards, which is perfect. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use, we got a box full of cables here, the kind of 6 to 8 pin, and we also have our Y splitters. So we're gonna use the Y splitter in situations where we're powering two risers. So with the 6 pin here, with the cables we're running, I'm sorry, 8 pin. We're gonna do an 8 pin to a 6 pin and then a splitter, and that'll power two risers. That'll be fine. That's what we did over here. It works out really nicely. And then we're gonna do an individual one directly to the card to power the card. So I'm gonna go ahead, pull off my cards now that I kind of know where they're at, and we'll get our GPU risers installed, and then we'll start to work on our cabling. Okay, we pulled our cards. We're getting ready to install our GPU risers. I'm not gonna lie, I think my camera work has been some of the worst tonight, so I do apologize, guys. But let's go ahead and get these risers installed and ready to go. So we'll go ahead and push that in, and then these have the little white clip there down inside. Kind of hard to see once you get into it, but then you can just push it right over there. So I'm going to get these installed, and then we'll get these rehung and ready to go. I can actually do the USB cables as well while I have it out, so that I don't have to worry about trying to do this, deal with the USB cables, why it's actually hung, and we can go ahead and be set and good to go. So yeah, so should be good. I do need to get another order of GPU risers in. I was just checking, I have 2 left. So that'll cover our 1 that we have coming in. I'm excited about that. That's the one that we sent up to Canada to get repaired. And that one actually worked out well. We sent up 3 total cards, an MSI RX 580 4 gig. And then we also sent up a Sapphire Nitro RX 470. And then we finally set up the Sapphire Pulse. Is that clicked in? No, it's not. It's just really hard to get to on this one. Then the Sapphire Pulse, the RX 580 8 gig. And I was actually really happy to hear that that one worked out. I was most excited to hear that that one got fixed. And that's the one we're getting back. The other 2, I talked about the MSI one in a previous video, but we'll talk in a future video. We'll talk about the status of each of them, why we ended up with one of the 3 got repaired, which is totally understandable. Like it worked out well. This one we're getting back, I actually bought broken. Like I bought knowing that it didn't work. So the fact that we got it working is like a win-win across the board. I'm not really gonna complain. I was sad to see my one RX 470 didn't make it. Apparently it had a lot of bubbled capacitors on it, but we'll get into that in a future video. So these are good to go. Now what we can do is we can take our USB cables and get them plugged in ahead of time to make life easier so that we don't have to worry about it later. Once we get these hung, so then we're not trying to push this. That's the worst one. These are hung. Trying to push the USB cable up into these is always quite a pain. So doing this before you hang these is always a great rule of thumb, at least from my book. Make your life easier, you know? Work smarter, not harder. Okay, so I think we're good to go. So let me get these rehung and then we'll start looking at power together. Okay, so our cards are reinstalled. We're good to go. We got our USB coming off of our GPU risers and going into our PCI slots. This board has two of the full-size X16 slots as well as a smaller one, so we just went ahead and filled them up. We got one more spot for expansion, as we talked about earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and get these cables wired up. We'll be utilizing just this HP power supply. We're not touching our ATX at all, guys. We're just powering it off of this HP 1200 watt. Now, as I talked about, it is 1200 watt because it's plugged into 240 volt versus 120. If it is plugged into 120, you only get 900 watts. So be back in just a second and we'll show you guys how we did this. Alrighty, she's not the prettiest in the fleet. For those of you guys that are cable management Nazis, this is probably giving you a mini anxiety attack, but we are set and good to go. I actually did not end up using the Y splitters that I talked about for the risers because there's no need for it. Why use splitters when I have enough 6-pin ports on my breakout board? So we currently have 3 available. This guy, our 1060 uses 6-pin, our 1650 uses 6-pin, our RX 580 used an 8-pin, and our 2080 used an 8-pin and a 6-pin. So that leaves us 3 total slots available. Other than that, guys, we're pretty much ready to go. Last thing I need to do is get HIVEOS flashed onto a solid state drive, which if you guys are interested, I'm not going to go through it doing that entirely here, but I do have a full video on that. I'll put that in the upper right hand corner on how to do that. I use this guy right over here. So this is a dock. This actually is a hard drive replicator. I'll put a link to it down in the description, but it works great because you can plug it into your computer and then you can go ahead and flash HIVEOS right onto this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll be back. I'll do that install. We're going to plug in our 240 volt power into both our ATX power and also into our server power supply, and we're going to boot this sucker for the first time. Let's get after it. Okay, so we got everything hooked up and good to go. We have our, you can see the red cable there. There's our power is plugged in, going back into our PDU here. We also have power going, you can see back in there into our HP power supply, which is good. We got a keyboard hooked up. We got a keyboard and a monitor hooked up. I did go ahead and get HIVEOS installed on our solid state drive, so that's hooked up to the motherboard. I do have a display adapter into our, we're running on a DVI, or no, I'm sorry, wow, can't think right now. We have, our DVI plugged in and run over to our monitor, so we'll have to see. DisplayPort, wow, words are hard, I swear. It's late. So DisplayPort into an adapter into a DVI going into our monitor here. I do have that plugged in the motherboard right now, but it may have to get plugged into one of these cards. We'll have to wait and see what happens. So should we get started? Hopefully nothing melts. So step 1 is to come over and power on our HP power supply, which is good. Step 2 is to come over and turn on, oh, I just realized that we don't have a power cable or a power button. Let me look into that real quick. Just realized that. Hang on, guys. Okay, so I robbed our power button off of our Mighty Mouse rig there. We'll see if this actually ends up working. I have no clue. You can see that the motherboard does have power. As you can see, the ROG Strix logo there that is powering up. So some things I'm noticing with the cards. So our 1650 fan is spinning. Our 580 is not. Our 2080 is, and our 1060 keeps like spinning and then like not spinning. So this is going to be interesting. So let's go ahead and hit our power button and see what happens. We have our CPU is powering up, which is good. Happy to see that. I am not getting any display, so I wonder if I have to plug directly into one of my cards. But all 4 cards are spinning right now, which is good. So let me go ahead and move my display into one of my cards, and we'll see what happens. Alrighty guys, so it's been a little while. We got HIVEOS up, but what a giant mess. So I couldn't get it to boot. I couldn't get any display out of my monitor. I plugged it into multiple cards, no luck. I plugged it into the motherboard, no luck. I tried HDMI, I tried DVI, nothing worked. So I decided to go ahead and install. I had an RX3, or I'm sorry, an R9 380 sitting around here. So I decided to plug that into the main X16 slot, plug into that for video, and unplug everything else. So what a mess now, dude. I thought it was a mess before, but it is a mess. And it looks like we were able to get it into HIVEOS, and we are able to get to the prompt, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and log this in so it shows up in HIVEOS, get the worker set up, and then my goal is to follow up with removing this card and plugging in my other cards and being good to go. So I will be back in a minute. I'm hoping we can get this working. It is getting late, and I want to get this out the door for you guys tomorrow. Okay, so here we are. It's almost midnight, and we're having one of those nights. So I get into HIVEOS using the R9 380, and HIVEOS can't get an internet connection. Well, lo and behold, the Ethernet port on the B550 is this weird, like 2.5 gig port. And apparently there's a bazillion posts online about the fact that this board literally has issues where the LAN driver doesn't work. So, yeah, literally when you boot this up, the LAN port has light activity on the outside where you plug in your Ethernet, and then as soon as HIVEOS boots, it shuts off. And everybody I saw online, you know, they were running like Windows and stuff like that, and they were having similar issues. Yeah, so we have a Hail Mary right now. We were on BIOS version 14.01. We're updating to like 22.06 or something insane. And this came out last month, the BIOS update. So I am praying this fixes it. If not, I gotta wait till tomorrow and get a PCI card. Literally, I have to get a. Well, let's see, if I get a PCI card, now I have to sacrifice a GPU slot. Holy cow! So yeah, this has not turned out very well. I do have a PCI Ethernet card, but this sucks. I mean, there are, like, I looked, there's posts up to 10 minutes ago on Reddit about this board and how it has issues with Ethernet. Like, it just doesn't work for some people. So I am praying that this works. So anyways, we'll be back here in a little while, guys. All right, well, it's after midnight. We updated the BIOS to 22.01 on this Asus Strix, or I'm sorry, this ROG Strix B550F gaming motherboard, and I do not recommend this piece of crap to anybody. Even on the latest BIOS, it still has this issue. Literally, the Ethernet has link lights at post, and then they literally turn off. So tomorrow we're going to try to get a Ethernet PCI card, and we're going to have to figure something out here to get this up and running. That's the cheapest solution right now. It just sucks because I got this off a community member. It was brand new, so like I can't blame that community member, but they had got it with like a Newegg shuffle or whatnot. But yeah, it sucks. We're kind of dead in the water. We can't mine at all. We can't move forward. I don't even know how this card is still, or this motherboard is still in production. Like, how are they selling these things with a bad Ethernet port? Boatloads of people have the issue in Windows, so I'm not the only one. But I am super disappointed. I'm definitely going to use this kind of video as a PSA to you guys to do not buy the Rogstrix B550F gaming motherboard. It's a 5-slot PCI, so I got excited to use it. Do not buy it for mining. It is bad news, and I'll give you guys an update once we go ahead and get this resolved. But as of now, we're going to sign off. What a failure of a video. If you guys did enjoy this with me the best you can, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe, and I'll keep you guys updated.